Hello, authors. Welcome to another edition of Self-Publishing Insiders. I am Jim Azevedo, and today I'm excited because our guest is Ashli O'Connell. How did I stumble across Ashli O'Connell? Well, I was checking out Jane Friedman's website and her blog, and I came across this really awesome article, you guys. It was titled, How a Debut Self-Published Novelist Earned 5 Figures in Royalties Within 10 Weeks. So the title caught me, but then I read the article, and the article was just really, it was superb. It was very articulate. It just broke everything down by step by step by step. So I went and stalked the author of that article, and that is Ashli O'Connell. Let me read Ashli's bio real quick. Ashli O'Connell is the author of the historical novel Emmaline. A lifelong storyteller, she began writing as a young girl in Utah and later spent more than 25 years crafting narratives in journalism, public relations, and marketing. Emmaline is her first work of fiction. She now lives in Missouri with her husband and 3 children. So again, Ashli, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
It's our pleasure. We have a similar background, journalism and marketing and PR, but We'll save that for backstage, because I want to really dive into your article and what you wrote about. But maybe we can start by just giving our audience here a little bit of background and foundation on you. So can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, like maybe how your upbringing in Utah perhaps inspired your story, and then how your professional life in journalism and marketing maybe informed your approach to book publishing?
Yeah, so I was technically not born in Utah, but I grew up there until I was 18. I was never a member of the LDS church, but my father was, and my extended family was. And if you know anything about growing up in Utah, you're very much a part of that cultural history. So this was part of my family legacy. I come from a line that includes some of the early settlers of the Mormon settlement in Frontier, Utah, a great-great-grandfather who had 3 plural wives. And I sort of always knew that history. But in my own home, I didn't actually grow up with that faith tradition, but was very much part of my family and my cultural life. I went to college in Missouri. So when I left Utah at 18, I never did go back to live other than for a few summers, but my family is all still there. So I'm back there, once or twice every year. I studied journalism in college. And when my career started as a copy editor for a Gannett-owned newspaper back when there were newsrooms, crawling with reporters and editors like ants. And it was so much fun, the greatest start of my career that I could have had. But I worked in, a variety of journalistic and PR positions, doing some advocacy journalism for a nonprofit, doing web content development for a university. And that position in web content development, which was in the early, 2012, 10, I think is when I started that position. That's when I came familiar with, SEO and how writing for the web was so different than anything I'd been taught. And I fell in love with that, the content marketing and ideas that really you need to understand in order to succeed on the web as a writer. You no longer just write creative headlines to get attention, but it's a lot of technical things that you need to know. And I really fell in love with that whole digital marketing aspect of it. So I kind of moved into that in the last 10 years of my career. When I wrote this book, my father had done genealogical work on our family line. And I always knew that my great-great-grandfather had been a polygamist. I descend from his 3rd wife. But I didn't know about his 2nd wife. And when I heard the story from my father that she was 14 years old, she came across the plane. She immigrated from Liverpool and came across the plains with a group of Mormons that walked, pushing hand carts. I don't know if you've heard that story. It's a really fascinating piece of American history.
Before I came across you in the book.
Yeah. So they walked. It took 4 months to walk from Iowa City to Salt Lake City, and it was a brutal, hellish trek, and hundreds died. So that story in and of itself is interesting by itself. But Lydia, this is the name of my great-great-grandfather's second wife. She was 14 years old when she undertook this journey with her parents. And when she arrived in the Salt Lake Valley, she was sent to the home of my great-great-grandfather, who was more than twice her age, under the pretense of rest and recovery. And within 2 weeks, she was told she was expected to be his second wife. And, there was a lot of religious pressure and coercion. I am very lucky to have possession of a autobiography that she wrote about her life. It's unpublished, but heard, all of this story in her own words. And she begged not to have to be a part of this marriage, but there was so much religious pressure. Really just, it captured my heart. It broke my heart to know that was.
It sounds heartbreaking.
Yeah, that was part of my legacy. I kind of needed to contend with. I wanted to understand it better. So, when I heard that story, I told my parents, and this was probably 10 years ago, that's going to be my book someday. And I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what kind of book. I never thought about writing fiction ever in my 25-year career. I don't believe I've taken a creative writing class, even through I have a master's in communication at this point. But it was January of 2024, I think my life came to a point where I had the time and just the compulsion that I want to write, and I want to try this as a novel. So I really started digging into the research. And I think that's how this all intersects. Fiction writing, of course, uses all different kind of muscles,
so much different than journalism. Because I was a journalism major, and I had an English minor, and I recall vividly how my English professor took me aside and said, "You're a J major, aren't you?"
Yes. I mean, I remember getting a C on a paper in English and going to the teacher, and I was like, "You don't understand. I'm a writer. You can't give me a C," and we, talking about how different the types of writing were and learning that in college. But fiction was just all new, and everything that I know about writing fiction, I learned from reading fiction.
Yes.
I'm an avid reader. I love historical fiction. I always have. I'm interested. I think that journalistic piece of me is very interested in people's stories and how we find meaning in those stories and apply them to today. That's just kind of that journalistic brain, I think, is interested in that. So all of that kind of came together at the right time. And I decided, I remember looking at my husband and saying, "Do you think I could write a novel?" You think he said, "Of course you could." So I started in on it, and I've kind of researched this, for years, just as a personal project, but really started digging into the research as I was starting to write. And that's how I came to it.
Okay. Excellent foundation. What else is intriguing to me is that as a debut self-published author who earned 5 figures within 10 weeks, you weren't writing contemporary romance,
right?
Or romantasy or a thriller. Like, this is historical fiction, but you still made quite the impact. And so I'm interested in kind of like switching gears here and diving in, like how you did it. And one of the first things in your article, you said, well, you've got to define your goal. Like, when you talk to new authors, you tell them, and even your marketing clients, you say, hey, step 1 has got to be define your goal.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why is that so important to be step number 1?
A lot of people make the mistake, and this is in any kind of marketing, of asking questions like, is this the right strategy? Or, they might look at their website and ask you, is my website good? And my answer to that question is always, what are you trying to do with your website? what are your goals, and is your website doing what you want it to do? Because there's no good website. There's a website that helps you achieve your goals, and likewise with any marketing strategy. So when I decided I was doing this, I was doing it. I wasn't going to just play around with it. I wanted to do it right. If I was going to put my name on something like this, I wanted to be as professional as it could possibly be. So I kind of started with that same question: what are your goals? And the first one was just to get this story in the world. And but the second one was, I want this book to stand up next to its traditionally published comps. And so it wasn't, I want to make money. It was, I want to produce a book that is, the reader can't tell, they don't pick it up and say, oh, this is a self-published book. So I started with hiring an editor and a designer. And I knew, when you've been an editor, one of the things is that cardinal rule that you can't edit your own work. You just can't. And a lot of people in self-publishing think that they can. And also I understand finances are really an issue. And so people are doing their best and coming at it, with what they can. But because that was my goal, I had to have a good editor and I had to have a good designer. And I spent the most time looking for them, vetting them, really kind of making sure I had a good relationship with the people that I chose to do that. Yeah. And I'm trying to remember the rest of that question, if it was a two-part question.
No, that's really good, because you kind of segued into like what my next question was anyway, which is perfect. And that was your early strategy, because you had mentioned in the article that you had this self-awareness to say, hey, I'm a team of one here. And I can't allow myself to get that tunnel vision. I'm going to bring in a team here. So I wanted you to kind of elaborate on who that team, who was involved in that team. But then you also just mentioned that you had you invested in two people primarily, that your editor and your designers. And I think that's really interesting for a couple of reasons. And number one of the things that we advise our authors here on this show and within our newsletter is that the book itself, as you mentioned in your article too, the book itself is your most important asset.
Yeah.
It's everything, especially in the publishing industry. It's a word of mouth industry. And another thing that I've mentioned here on the podcast before is that out of all the bestsellers I've met, all of the through all the best-selling indie authors that I've met in the past 15 years, if there are two things that they'll outsource, it is design and editing.
Yeah.
So beyond that, tell us about who else that you brought in to be a part of your team.
Okay. And I don't think, I'll just say real quick, I don't think I said in the article, but I did use beta readers early on. So I did have 5 or 6 beta readers, 2 of whom were sensitivity readers, who had, been in the LDS church, so they could sort of help with all that cultural stuff that, since I wasn't, didn't grow up directly in it. So those things happened first. When I got to the point where I'm publishing this, it's happening, I'm building, the team who I'm going to pay to help me, I thought I was insecure that I didn't have a publishing team behind me. I thought, because it was so important to me to do this well and to do this professionally. But what I do have is a lot of friends and colleagues that are smarter than me, and especially in certain areas, you kind of know what your strengths are and what your weaknesses are. Right. And so I just chose, it was a group of 6 or 7, 6 friends, I think, that all have kind of different strengths that they could bring to it. When I approached them about the project, I told them, I'm not asking you to be an editor. That's being handled professionally. I don't even want you to look at the book. I want you to kind of be a reader, look at this more as a reader and help me with the marketing. So the biggest thing that they did was help me with language on the back of the book. You know, anyone who's written a book knows you can write 96,000 words 10 times easier, 100 times easier than writing that small description on the back.
Yeah.
And so I had them all help with that. And, you know, I got feedback like some of the verbiage they didn't understand because they hadn't grown up in the LDS culture. And I was so used to those words and that language and culture that it didn't occur to me that they would be misunderstood. You know, I remember one of the girls said, this is fine, but you're burying your hook. You know, it's at the bottom, put it at the top. So they were the kinds of things that I could give them, throw a little job at them and say, could you look at this and give me 5 minutes? And, you know, over the course of 6 months, they helped with that. Whether it was, you know, add language or the design assets or just publishing ideas. Well, you know, I had a friend who worked in the media for a long time, so I kind of leaned on her for ideas for local media, and which mostly she came back and told me, you need to keep doing what you're doing digitally. The local media is not going to be the way that you sell this book, you know? So it was that type of advice that I would go to them for. And they were really, really valuable in helping me do things that I could have done alone, but it wouldn't have been as strong. And
it's so important.
Yeah.
To get other eyes on a project, because we're so close to our projects that there's so many things that can just, you know, fly by the wayside that, you know, we're so past even looking at.
Yeah. Exactly.
Quick comment here from Layla Bell, who says it's important to be reminded that our experiences and understandings are not universal.
Exactly.
100%. When it comes to your pre-production and your pre-launch marketing, what do you see as the biggest mistake that new authors make when releasing their first book?
Oh, I mean, for sure, it's releasing the book and then saying, oh, does anyone know how I can market this?
Oh, okay.
You know, and so it's basically, it's not giving any thought to marketing before they publish.
Gotcha.
So, and I think that question needs to start 6 months or 12 months ahead of time. You've got to start building an audience. You need to start building buzz around that book. That's going to look very differently based on your genre and what your goals are for the book. But not giving any thought to it before you start, I think, is the biggest mistake.
Okay. Let me bring up another question from the audience. And then before you answer, I'm going to go into another question too, because this is a perfect segue here to the next question on my list. This is from Beth. Hi, Beth. Her question is, did you have a big email list?
No.
Before you got started? Sorry. Yeah, that's okay.
I'm waiting for question 2.
Let me go into the next question because I want to talk about building an audience, because in the article that you posted on Jaden Friedman's site, you didn't have a name. You say that you didn't have a name or a platform, and you gave yourself 6 months to launch. So I'm super curious, like, how did you do it? How did you build trust and familiarity with essentially strangers? And then what was the kindling that you used, if any, to help spark that reader enthusiasm?
Yeah. So first of all, no, I did not have any email list at all. I was not on Substack until after I made the decision to publish the book. I did have about 450 Facebook friends. My personal network is really supportive. So I started with my personal network and announced the book and, announced the project and told them, I'm kind of gave them the rundown on what I was doing and what that was going to look like. I started, I built the Substack, created the author Instagram, author Facebook, and website. And the first place I promoted them was on my personal Facebook page. And then because of the book and the topic and the themes, it lends itself really well to kind of historical and educational content. So I started writing Substack pieces about 19th century Mormon polygamy, about the history of the handcart movement. Okay. Some of those stories that would be interesting to historical fiction fans or people interested in American history, and people kind of in that LDS or adjacent world that are just sort of interested in that topic. That's who I started trying to attract. So it was creating that kind of content and then interacting with others on Substack who were writing about the same topics. By the time I launched the book, and still, I mean, I think I have 124 people on my email list. I have not successfully grown it very large. My Instagram, I think, is about 500 right now, but when I launched, it was under 300. I did have a lot of success at getting my personal network excited and enthusiastic. So yeah, and they were the first 50 to 100 subscribers on everything that I had, was people from, and it was very interesting. You might have 400 Facebook friends, but 100 of them you really have a daily relationship with, and the rest of them are from some other part of your life,
past lives.
Yeah, but I really generated a lot of excitement and interest. And I think it was starting with my personal network, which is something that I think I know that's something I touch on in the article, that we can get into on whether or not you should tap into your personal network for sales.
Yeah, that question's coming up.
Yeah, but I did
on my list.
And so, yeah, I think that's how it started. And then I started doing some advertising on Meta that was successful, especially in the beginning. And pretty quickly, the book started escaping my network, and it really has generated a lot of word of mouth. A lot of the reviews have come in at, I think, a really fast pace. I don't know what's really normal, but I've between Goodreads and Amazon at about 500 reviews right now.
That's fantastic. Okay, so it's definitely growing.
Yeah. So I think after 6 weeks or so, it really had a pretty strong word of mouth element that was pushing it forward.
I mean, relatively, that's a really short time frame. And I think, I feel kind of relieved. I wonder how our audience feels, because you're so humble. You're like, yeah, I only had a couple of hundred followers at the time, and it's only a few hundred more now. But yet, because, sometimes we're used to seeing stories about, bestsellers who had like 10,000 followers when they got started or something like that. That just seems so unattainable. It's like that golden ring that's out of reach. But it's refreshing to hear you say, no, I just had my Facebook followers, like we all do with our friends and family. Yeah. And you use them, or they helped you. I don't want to say that you used them, but they helped you get started.
And what I did was very intentionally try to engage them in the process. I am really bad at this. Sorry. So, it was the little things like letting them vote and pick on my author photo, letting them, here's some typesetting choices that I got back from the designer, releasing a chapter or half a chapter and ask, what do you think is going to happen next? Every milestone I celebrated, to the point that I thought, this is risky because I may really wear people out on this. And I'm sure I did, on some people for sure. But there were enough people that just really liked being a part of that process with me. And so that builds some buy-in. They then have personal, kind of excitement about seeing the project succeed, because they've been from the beginning. They're like, oh, I got to help choose that cover, and I read that first chapter before anyone else even knew about the book. And so those were some things I did to not just keep telling them, I'm writing a book, would you please buy it to support me?
Right. But it wasn't about selling the book to your followers. It was about that interaction and that connection and that involvement through the journey.
And I was so excited. I didn't have to manufacture that. It was, I I was having so much fun. So sharing that was really fun for me. And I think that anytime you have really genuine enthusiasm, that um, others really respond to that, whether it's people or people you don't know out there on social media or whatever. Genuine excitement, enthusiasm sells.
I love that. We've been talking about that more on the podcast because we love seeing self-published authors get picked up by traditional publishing houses and growing their careers. And what we're seeing is that magic from indie authors to build their fan bases like you did from scratch, and to involve their readers through the process of publishing, what the warts and everything. Then they feel like they're indebted to the process too. So that when the book is finally released, it's not just the author's celebration, it's everybody's celebration together. I just think that's wonderful. So that next question I had for you, you started to go down this path here, and I cut you off. I'm sorry. In the article that you mentioned that you've heard advice from other authors that, you shouldn't have your friends and family buy the book because it might, how did you put it? It might confuse the algorithms.
I have seen that advice so many times, and I would say it's mostly on like Reddit or Threads, and I don't know how accurate it is. I don't know if anybody knows how that algorithm runs, right? But I've heard that a lot. People say, oh, if you have your family and friends buy, they read all kinds of books and they're just going to confuse the algorithm. And particularly with Amazon, they're not going to know who to show the book to. And I just thought, if people in my personal network don't buy this book, I have nothing to start with, for one thing. I want to share the book with them. They want to buy the book. And why would I turn away or discourage any sale? And so I believed that with, compounding sales, that the algorithm would figure out the best place for the book. And of course, there's a lot of other things you can do there with, your keywords and positioning. But unless you are, maybe you're publishing under a pen name, or your book is just really misaligned with your personal network, which is, that's the case for a lot of authors, that they may not want to be sharing it with their personal network. But if you are going public with your name, my suggestion is get people excited, because your personal network, those are the people who care about you, believe in you, want to share it for you. They're going to review often without being asked. They're going to share it. They're just going to do that because they're excited that someone they know has created this book and they love it. And why turn down a sale? That made no sense to me.
Especially near the release date. That's when you want those sales to percolate and get that book on, get it up in the sales rankings.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't know where that advice sort of started or emanates from, but it's repeated very often in self-publishing spaces. And I just kind of rejected that. And
it sounds like it's outdated, maybe.
Yeah.
But have you seen it affect the algorithms when it comes to like the also bots, or readers who purchase this? Well, readers who purchase this also bought this, or as it relates to related books? Did it affect that at all?
They're perfectly aligned. Okay. All the books that I have seen, from sponsored to also bots to, even their packaging, the readers who bought this also bought this. Yeah. I signed on one day and saw they had Emmaline and Calamity Club to get. And I was like, what? Are you kidding me? That was so exciting. So, the books have all been historical fiction books or other like pioneer type books. They fit perfectly. I haven't seen any downside to the strategy that I used.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears again and ask you about testing the message. I thought this part was really interesting in your article on Jane Friedman's site. You mentioned message testing via Substack and Reels for ads that you might do post-launch. How much time did you spend testing those messages, and what seemed to work for you?
It's hard to say how much time. I was making Reels 2 to 3 times a week, writing an article once a week or so there for a couple of months, and just looking to see what resonated, what got
actually,
more.
Just I want to make sure I was clear with my question too. Were you testing for ads that you were going to run after the book launch?
Yes. Yes. So it started with just watching what resonated within my content.
Gotcha.
And one day it was just an idea I had for a reel that day. It wasn't that's all it was. What am I going to do? Oh, I have this idea. I held up the book and said something like, this book may not be for you. If you like a sanitized version of history, if you're looking for a romantic pioneer story, don't read this book. For reasons why you should read it, read the caption. And I didn't give much thought to it. That's just a reel I tried that day. And then I tried the same sort of message on Substack. And for me, it blew up. It would not be numbers that anyone else would be impressed with, but it, was significantly more successful than anything else that I had tried. So I made another similar reel to test it and had the same, the kind of the same response to it. So I was wanting to create some meta ads to test different messaging.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the things I was doing, was looking to see how my content performed. So during that pre-order period, I ran some low budget meta ads. All I wanted to do was look at the click data. Okay. What messages cause people to click?
Okay. When you say low budget, how low budget are we talking? Are you
$5 a day?
$5 a day.
I was $5 a day. Yeah. So the one ad that I had was just a cover of the book. I didn't even go into Canva and do any of the cute little things. It's just literally the image of the book cover. And at the top it said, I think, this is not a cozy pioneer story. I think that's what it said, or something very similar. Mm-hmm. So when I was testing that one, it started selling books. And the book was a pre-order. I think I had 15 pre-orders in the first week. All of them were probably related to me.
And that's just from the testing.
Right. And then I had no pre-orders for, 3 or 4 weeks. So okay. I ran that ad, and all of a sudden I was getting multiple orders every day and got 66 pre-orders. So I know it was the ad. It's really, attribution is so hard between Meta and Amazon. Now it's very difficult for me to tell with all the different things going on. But at the time, there weren't very many variables to look at. So that ad, so all of a sudden I had like 66 pre-orders, and I kept running it, and I kept getting pre-orders, and the click data on it was insane. The cost per click, all of those metrics were insane. So it's like, okay, this is working. So that, then I started thinking about, well, why is it working? Well, I think it's that reverse psychology. One, you have a second or two to stop people, on Facebook or Instagram. And that idea of, this book might not be for you, or this is not just
it's funny how that message worked. Like, this is not, like, if you're looking for a cozy historical, this is not for you.
Don't read this. Don't read this book. You're not gonna like it, So that my reasoning was really just to test messaging and click data, and I found something that worked pretty early on. So I have tried to use that sort of reverse psychology concept in some of my other marketing. It's not the only thing that I use, but I did find that was really successful. And I think that the concept of testing messaging, testing it on cheap ads, I think is just a really good marketing tactic that if you have the money, you should try. And it worked for me.
When you did the test and then you had that 4 weeks where you had no pre-orders, were you trying a different ad at that time, or you just did not do any ads?
I hadn't started any ads. Yeah.
Okay. Can I bring up your cover image here?
Yes.
So that we can show the audience what we're talking about.
Sure.
So there it is. And I think the cover is excellent when I first saw it, because it instantly, you can tell it's a historical. and there's nothing cozy about it.
Right.
These people are walking through a frozen river, it looks like, and it's snowing outside.
Yeah, it's just from a scene from the book that they really went through. And I so badly, my designer created 3 different covers for me to choose from, but this was the one I gave him specifics on what I wanted it to look like. And then I had about 60 people vote on the cover, and this one was the one that overwhelmingly won. So I really love it. I'm really proud of it.
I can see why.
Yeah.
And we've told our viewers here before that your cover images are both marketing and content. You know, they're giving those readers a promise.
Yeah.
Okay. Gosh, the time is flying, so I want to make sure I get to some more of this stuff.
Sure.
Let's talk about risk tolerance a little bit. The number one advantage to self-publishing, according to our best-selling indie authors, is just having total control. But you acknowledge in your article that there are certainly risks, everything from your money to the time that you spent to putting yourself out there to that public judgment, and even emotional stability. So how did you equate the risk-benefit ratio and decide to move forward? Because it can be paralyzing.
Yeah, I had a lot of support. I had a lot of family support to move forward. And I think that helped with feeling like, you know, if this doesn't work, I've got people behind me, you know, that believe in me, but also the knowing what that goal was, to get the story out there and make sure it was good. Once I've done that, I'm going to feel good about this project. But there were a few things that I mentioned in the article, like putting it on NetGalley for reviews prior to publication. That comes with risk of launching with low ratings. And if you're an independent author, the numbers that you're going to get are small. So, you know, any low ratings are going to really impact that. That was scary to make that decision to do that. But I knew, well, I have to launch with reviews, right? I have to put this out there for the world to judge. That's what's going to happen after it launches. And then I chose to submit for a Kirkus review. Again, because I wanted that sort of industry, I hoped for an industry stamp of approval on it. That was terrifying. And not, you know, with Kirkus, if you get a negative review, you can choose not to have it published. So I knew I had control over that. But what I couldn't control is how devastated I would be if I got back something that really tore it up. It's like, this will, this is going to hit my self-confidence right when I'm trying to launch if I get a negative review. Yeah. And I spent weeks thinking about whether or not to do that. The money thing, like, you're absorbing that all yourself. You know, there's no team behind you that's, you know, that publishing house that's taking on that risk. So you need a high risk tolerance. I didn't even know that I had a real high risk tolerance. You know, in some ways those things were super scary. Being so public about it, which I felt like was the only way I could be successful, also could leave me failing in front of everybody that I know. And I worried about that, you know, every day. That voice inside me was like, well, what if you fail? What if everybody sees you fail? You know, but I believed in this book. I believed it had an audience. I did try traditional publishing with the book, and I had 60 rejections. So 60. Yeah. So that was in my head, you know. What if they're all right? You just have no idea why with the way that this system works. But I believed so much in the book. I really believed it had an audience. And I think it was that self-motivation to bring the story in the world was more important than anything that could go wrong. So
I love that.
Yeah. And a family that kept telling me, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. You know?
Yeah, it sounds like that passion got you over the line
Yeah.
for your story. Um, can we talk about going wide, your decision to go wide and your pricing decisions? You mentioned that you chose to publish wide and price your book similarly to comparable traditionally published titles. Number one, why did you decide to distribute widely and then price your books the way that you did?
I felt that connected back to my goal, which was to be indistinguishable from a traditionally published book. And that meant it should be available everywhere, right? So, I mean, it's not in brick and mortar, but it's on those websites. And I didn't know that much about KU, but I had heard historical fiction is not really one of the genres that necessarily thrives on KU. But I really was never interested in putting all my eggs in one basket from a business decision, but also just from a positioning with the book. And then with the pricing, I looked at what the comps were selling for, and I mean, I didn't try to charge as high or above any of those comps, but to be
just kind of in the ballpark.
Yeah, in the ballpark. And I think this is also just one of my strong marketing opinions, is that price communicates value. So, you know, if you're selling a book for $2.99 or $1.99, that I mean, there's good reasons for that, and I tried explaining about how the goal really helps inform those decisions, I think is important. But for my goal, that was going to communicate to buyers, oh, this is a self-published book. This is not really worth the same, you know. But if it's priced what they expect a book to be priced at, then they're going to, you know, it's that I can't think of the
psychological decision, like getting
exactly.
value out of it.
So yeah, I priced it
at you pay for type thing.
Yeah, so I priced it $9.99 for digital and $17.99. I always say that wrong. So it was $17.99 for paperback. It was $2 less during my launch period. Okay. So sorry about these earbuds keep falling out. No, that's fine. And yeah, so that was why. And it was important to me to be available everywhere, and it was important to me to look to communicate that value. The book is 96,000 words, 369 pages. It's a year and a half of research and work, and I think those things calculate into your pricing decision as well. And you know, you have to kind of have to believe in your product and yourself that this is worth the value, and see what the market does with it. And, you know, I haven't had trouble selling it. So
I'm so glad I asked you that question, because I think a lot of self-published authors are underpricing their work, and sometimes sometimes significantly pricing your work. And you're telling them, hey, go out there, do the research, look at those comparable titles that are published by traditionally published authors and others as well. And you don't want to underprice, but you don't want to overprice either. Just you know, be in that range that readers are expecting. Okay. I want to make sure I get to this next question too before we run out of time. And that next question is, I guess maybe it's more of an observation. You mentioned earlier that your name and your platform were not what ultimately mattered. Well, you mentioned this in the author. Your name and your platform were not what ultimately mattered. It came down to readers and their word of mouth.
Yeah.
In the article, you said that word of mouth was the single most important drivers of sales.
Yeah. And
how did you feel that enthusiasm for those readers who didn't know you just a couple months earlier?
Well, I discovered it accidentally. So one day I was looking at my KDP dashboard, and I knew what I sold normally in a day, what was average, and my sales had like quadrupled or 5 times. I'm a word person, not a number person.
About 90%.
You know, the graph went like this in one afternoon, and then I looked at Goodreads, and the ad TBR, the ads to the want to read shelf also had jumped up like by 90, and this was I don't know, maybe a month into release, and I was like, what's going on? Something is going on. I'm looking at ads. I'm looking at all the data I can, try to explain this. It can't just be a fluke. So I Googled the book.
Did you think it was a glitch?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
No, I didn't. Maybe I should have, but I did, because it was on 2 platforms though, too.
Okay.
You know, I just Googled the book, and Facebook had indexed a post in a historical fiction. It's a public historical fiction group just for historical fiction readers. And someone had gone in there and posted that they read the book and loved it. And by the time I found, and Google happens to index it, you know, they don't index everything on Facebook, but they had. So I discovered that post. It was a public group. By the time I found it, it had, you know, something like 30 shares, 200 likes, 30 or 40 comments. And that's the sales run from that event lasted about 5 days. So, and I mean, that's when I hit #1 on Amazon, and I got to have that for a week. You know, it's a fleeting number, but man, that's exciting. And so I watch the sales, you know, like we all do. And every time I see this bump like that, I go look at, now I know several of those groups to look at, and I'll go in there and look, and there's been a post about the book. So that's why I say I know it's been the single most important driver of sales, because I get these huge sales bumps. They'll last 3 to 5 days, you know, which is kind of the lifetime of a post like that. And then I'll typically end up with an average that's just a little higher than it was before, because you've got
the new normal.
Because you have a whole new group of people who are now talking about the book and sharing about it. So,
but you also had some readers who were like sharing, they're tagging you and sharing them, you know, holding the book or opening the box when they got the shipment. That's really cool.
And all of those people were that I put that out, you know, on all of my social media, but it was like week 1, you know, like 2 days after the book launched, I posted, and starting on my personal Facebook, hey, paperbacks are going to start arriving in the next day or 2. I can't, you know, I would love to see your package or see a little video of you opening it. Show me a picture of it. And
you weren't paying them, you weren't incentivizing them in any other way. They just, you had a connection with them.
Yeah. They were excited about it. And so, and some people DM'd me to them, or just texted them, but a lot of people were posting them. Some of them were tagging them, and I had so many. I made an Instagram reel out of it. Now I have tried that with some videos and asked people, send me just a quick video with who your favorite character is, and if you want to say why, you can, by the way, just the name of the character. And I thought that would be a fun reel. Yeah, nobody responded to that. So you don't know what's gonna, you know, you try things and you see what's gonna hit. But I think in those early days, I just had a lot of people excited about it, and they responded to that excitement. I didn't ask them, oh, put a hashtag with it, or you know, I didn't do it in a way that I think sometimes readers feel like they're being used as content.
Yeah, that's interesting to know too. So you weren't directing them at all.
But I did say, and I'll make a reel. You know, send them to me, and I'll make a reel. And so that, I mean, every time you get someone to post that cover, or, you know, share about it, that's just getting you into a whole new group of people. So
and it sounds like they were enthused to do it. I love that.
Yeah,
that's great. Of course, I went over time, but I want to end by asking you one last question here. And that is, you know, given all that you've learned through the process, what would you do differently next time, if anything?
I would love to have started a little earlier.
You gave yourself 6 months.
I gave myself 6 months, I think closer to 12. And that's kind of what I see a lot of traditionally published authors doing. I'm even starting to do that just a little bit now, as I drop hints about what I'm writing now. That I am writing something, you know, to kind of get people excited about that. I think I'm trying to think what I said in the article. I know NetGalley was a really big investment for me, and partially I didn't know quite what I was doing. So I didn't know about the co-op. So I paid a lot more than I needed to. But it was a, $650 investment for, I think I got 14 reviews, and they were really good. They were really well written, thoughtful, good reviews. But that's the one thing I have a little buyer's remorse on. And I might, I would. And I was disappointed by how many people downloaded the book and, didn't follow through. So that just made it feel kind of not worth the investment. So I would probably do that a little differently next time. And I feel like there was something else that I know I wrote in the article that
that's
not
okay. We're gonna send
right
people to the article to check it out. Anyway, so if people want to learn more about you and your books, and even get a link to the article, they can go to your website. Is that correct?
Yeah, my website is ashleyoconnell.com.
There it is for everybody.
And on Facebook, it's Ashli O'Connell author. On Instagram, it's Ashli O'Connell author. I'm on Threads as well, but Threads I use basically for my author to author, communication. So you can find me there. And if you Google the book, it's everywhere. Draft to Digital has put it for me, and anywhere books are sold online.
Well, thank you for entrusting us with your book. And actually, thank you. This was a lot of fun. I learned a lot. I hope our viewers and listeners did too. And you guys, if you enjoyed this episode here with Ashli, can you do us a favor and share it with your author friends? Just really get the word out about the podcast, but also Ashli's awesome book and her article as well. For those of you who are interested in seeing what our upcoming topics are going to be, you can bookmark dddlive.com and you can see what the next topic is going to be, who our next guest is going to be in subsequent weeks. And if you are investigating self-publishing, why not sign up for a Draft to Digital account simply by going to draft2digital.com. To our audience, I noticed some new names out there. So if you're new to the podcast and to Draft to Digital, thank you for joining us today. I hope that you enjoyed it. And to some of you regulars out there, you guys, thanks for joining us week in and week out. And of course, Ashli, thanks again for your time. I know you're super, super busy. I so enjoyed this conversation.
Great. Well, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I love talking indie publishing. I think it's a great time for indie authors, and I just want to see everybody succeed. I'm excited for all of us.
Here. Amen to that. Can you hang out for a second backstage? Sure.
Yeah.
Great. I'm going to play a quick commercial, and then I'll see you back there in about 30 seconds. Thanks, everybody, and we hope to see you here same time and same place next week.
Ebooks are great, but there's nothing quite like holding your own print book in your hand. It's a beautiful celebration of your writing accomplishment. That's why we've created D2D Print, a convenient and easy print-on-demand service built to make it easy for you. We've got more than 20 beautiful templates to give your book a pro look, and we can even convert your book cover into a machine-perfect full wraparound cover for print. Yet another convenient option for you and your books. And you can get started right now at draft2digital.com.